All right. First point is term limits prevent power from becoming too concentrated at any level of government. When somebody holds the same position for decades, they become far more likely to be beholden to donors, lobbyists, and political insiders, and far less accountable to the people. Term limits break that cycle and make room for leaders that are actually connected to the communities they serve. Term limits also broaden representation within government. They create space for new voices, new perspectives, and new leadership styles. That constant renewal brings fresh ideas and prevents the kind of bureaucratic stagnation that develops when the same individuals occupy the same role for decades. Term limits also help build public trust. When people see the same person in the same office, whether it be elected or like appointed, when they see that same person in the same office for 20, 30, 40 years, or when that person is 90 years old, with little to show for it, if anything, they stop believing that the government is responsive to them. At a certain point, long term officials start to feel untrustworthy and unaccountable to the people. Leadership in a democracy should belong to the people, not to bureaucrats or corporate funded lifetime incumbents. I would also say on that point that when people trust the government, we have a higher amount of social cohesion in general in society. We have less people creating crazy conspiracy theories. We have less people protesting and doing all of the shit that just tends to cause problems in society. Um, we also already accept the principle of term limits being important when it comes to the most powerful office in this country, being the presidency. We recognize that the term limits are necessary to prevent a dangerous concentration of power at the highest level. It's only logical to then apply that same safeguard to other powerful positions within our country. Overall, they protect our democracy from stagnation, corruption, and entrenched power. They keep the government accountable, dynamic, and focused on the people, not on donors, insiders, or careerist interests. That's all I got.
All right. So, Gorps Inc. My question to you is: isn't most of the things that you listed, creating space for new voices, bureaucratic malaise, life-term incumbents, and the like, also handled by having and ensuring that elections are themselves competitive?
I think that there's plenty that can be done to make elections competitive, but we're not just talking about elected officials here. We're talking also about appointed people.
But the prompt is all elected positions and
All
appointed people.
positions and appointed people.
Yes.
Exactly. You're only
Yes.
talking about half the prompt, and I don't think that making elections more competitive alone fixes the issue because of things like name recognition and huge amounts of corporate donors, APAC donors. All these things are
Those are
effectively
separate
not going
issues
to make these
from term
elections
limits, though.
fair.
Those are sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Those are different problems than having no term limits, because those positions would still exist with
I agree with you,
the
and competitive
so
elections
that's
are
not
also different than a term limit issue. I think that we need
right.
term limits
So
and competitive elections.
but you're not. But even if you have a competitive elections, you still have the issues with APAC funding, like you mentioned. You still have the
Yep,
corporate donors issue.
term limits.
All those things still exist with term limits. They're instead of a person being able to build their own power outside of those corporate interests and things like that through establishing expertise within the congressional district or Senate, president, whatever the case may be, courts. We can go through the gamut. Instead of being able to build their own expertise and power outside of those, they are now more reliant, especially in elected positions, in order to be able to get to the position in the first place. Would you disagree
I
with some of that?
I would disagree with that. I think that there's a higher likelihood for people to be able to break through all of that funding, especially when governments support the ability for them to do that. For example, Seattle has a fund funded for by the taxpayer, where the taxpayer can say, "I want to give X amount of money to this candidate," and they don't actually have to pay for it. The government pays for it. This is one way that people can break through all that funding, but ultimately, there's more opportunity for somebody to break it when you're kicking somebody that's been there for too long out.
All right. At a base, term limits for elected position officials is anti-liberal and anti-democratic, as it is limits the people's ability to have a say in their government in a representative democracy, which the United States is at its core. While the founding fathers did not want direct democracy, they wanted a strong representative democracy, one which the House of Representatives itself most closely hewed to the passions of the public. Creating term limits for Congress itself would be a violation of the foundational principles of American democracy. But let's assume you do not care what the founders wanted. After all, there are just a bunch of racist people who thought that the peculiar institution that dominated the South existed was a fine compromise, slavery. Not only that, the Senate was less democratic at the founding until the 17th Amendment. Or maybe you support the 22nd Amendment, which established term limits for the presidency. Let's start with the 22nd Amendment. I also support this due to the immense power vested in the presidency. But the question is not should we have term limits at all, it's should we have it for all elected positions and government appointees. Moving back to the 17th Amendment, let's explore the reason why it was changed in the first place. To keep it brief, the 17th Amendment was established because one Nelson Aldrich of Connecticut, due to his immense wealth and connections within the Republican Party, managed to buy his seat and become a national party boss for the Republican Party. Curious how we are dealing with this problem again in a different form, isn't it now? While we deal with this problem in a different form, I would argue that I would argue that unelected party bosses is not one of them because elected officials are able to gain power over time through the development of expertise. Expertise, that is the operative word here. Expertise is only gained over time, and term limits will move the expertise away from elected and accounted officials to unelected party bosses and bureaucrats, back to money interest in a way that is even worse than what we experience today. Power moves away from the people to oligarchs, just like it was with the Senate prior to the 17th Amendment. It's for these reasons, keeping true to our democratic principles, creating expertise in politics with people who are accountable to the people, and mitigating power concentration in wealth that I oppose placing term limits on all elected and appointed positions.
Okay, so you said that you support term limits for the presidency. Why is that?
Term limits for the presidency exist basically because of the immense power that the presidency holds, and that is because Congress has ceded power to the presidency over time. Should the president go back to what the founders intended and being more of a chief magistrate rather than a chief executive, CEO, then I would probably be less against less for.
So do you think the Supreme Court holds immense power as well?
I do believe the Supreme Court holds immense power, but again,
so would you agree with term limits there?
But again, we are not talking about just.
I just asked you a question. I asked you a question.
I would say that rather than there being term limits, because there is currently one term limit, you're just there for life, establish some sort of age cap or maybe just a term itself, then you would have your thing. But I guess that amounts to the same thing.
Okay, what about Congress?
Congress, no. Congress should not have term limits.
They don't have immense power?
I would expect. No, each individual person in Congress does not hold immense power. You can make arguments that the House, the Speaker of the House does, and the Senate, the head of the Senate party that's in charge has power. But every individual member has already the powers diffused across the entire body through appointments to different committees and the like, as well as other things.
Every member of Congress has immense power, especially when a huge amount of their votes come down to just a couple votes separating whether something passes or not. That gives every single member the immense power in choosing what happens to our country. You're just wrong on that front.
I completely disagree.
But how exactly does a term limit equal power go to our oligarchs? Because right now, everybody is bought off. Pretty much every single person in our government is bought off. Our appointed officials are beholden to their donors because they want to make more money on the side. Everybody is bought off. So what makes you think that term limits is going to do that? When that's
is Bernie Sanders bought off?
He has a couple larger donors.
Is he bought off? Do you believe that he's actually a man of principle?
I think he is one of the few that is not.
What would happen if Bernie Sanders what would happen to Bernie Sanders if there was a term limit of say 3 consecutive or 3 terms? Would we still have that kind of
Bernie Sanders would bring somebody under his wing and try to get that person to replace the seat, but ultimately the voters would get to choose.
So then an unelected party boss ends up getting the immense amount of power that is not being able to be held accountable to the people.
Not what I said.
But you said he would be able to pull somebody under his wing and be able to move them through.
Yes. Bernie could befriend somebody and have this person come to events and have this person would already have the same opinions as Bernie, and Bernie would say, I like this guy. Not some unelected party boss from like the DNC saying it. Bernie would say, I like this guy.
No, it's actually the exact same principle. So the left consistently says that the DNC has this immense amount of power that they're able to wield and influence elections and things like that. If without term limits, people are able to rise up to their position, their expertise, their power, and be able to counter some of that. If you get rid of those people in Congress and have them cycle through every whatever the term limit might be, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the case, you end up eroding that and putting power back into party bosses because you have to keep not consensus. I'm losing the word here, but you have to keep consistency across the different
How many
generations
30
and comes
like
from
people
different
do
things.
you think would be willing to run around the country if the incumbent person that's been there for 30 years suddenly was gone? Because the answer is
I,
a shit ton. And continuously, they're winning despite the lack of big funding. They're winning
but
when these other politicians exit. Whether that they're
and
exiting, some of them are exiting for term limits because they have their own issues, or not issues, but they have their own laws, or whether they're exiting because they're done with politics. A bunch of these people that are not super corporate funded, that are a lot of, mostly
but that
grassroots grass
sorry.
funded, grassroots funded. These people are winning. What we're seeing right now, when people actually go and leave office and somebody has to take over, we are seeing the non-corporate funded people winning. But
I
these
think that
people
you
that have been there too long need to step down for that to even happen.
I think that you are attributing the primary problem here to it. You're doing you're doing attribution here. The issue with those is not the fact that they are incumbents. The issue with those is funding, and the things that surround that, and the fact that elections themselves are not very competitive. Whether it comes from the internal primary politics of it, or it
What
comes
do
to
you
the
mean by
general
the issue
election.
is
If
funding?
the issue is
Specifically that part.
the issue is funding. So a person that is new to the scene is less likely to get funding, but regardless of
Those
their
are the people that
establishment
are
or
winning. That's what I'm
what.
saying. We've seen this trend for the last like 2 years. Those are the people that are winning.
Yeah, they're winning now, but they're winning in spite of the fact there's no term limits.
Yes, they're winning because other people are stepping down, though. So if we have term limits and we have other people that are forced to
Even
step down after sitting there with name recognition for 30 years, because so many studies show that that name recognition matters more than any campaigning you do.
okay, would you do
Them
you
having
disagree?
their
Do you
name
disagree
recognition
with
is the
me?
only reason that they're still there. They
Do
are
you
not
disagree with
accountable
me
to
that
the
that's
people
a
because they
violation
know
of
about the
democratic
name
principles?
recognition. To say that this person can't hold the exact same position, no, because you know what that person gonna do? They can still go represent their community. They can either go back to local. If they're in Congress, they can go to the House. Or if they're in the Senate, they can go to the House. If they're in the House, they can go to the Senate.
I think many
If
countries would
they're in
disagree with you,
an
but that's fine.
appointed position, they can apply for a different appointed position. It's not that
We
they have to
just
be
disagree
out of
there.
government completely. It's that that position needs to be changed.
I simply at a base just disagree with that because it's a violation, in my opinion, of liberal democratic principles of people being able to choose a
Well,
representative,
fuck
even if it's the
liberals.
same crusty older person over and over again. The fact that we have a Bernie Sanders able to run forever is fine to me as long as the people don't want that. Part of the problem that we have with our system is the fact that these positions aren't very competitive from a general election perspective. Does with or without name recognition ID or anything like that due to the nature of first past the post winner take all election systems, the fact that we don't have multi member districts, etc. All those things make it to where people are less competitive in general. And if we solve that, we actually fix the issue that you have, which is the fact that people are staying there forever despite the wishes of other people.
So I agree with you that first past the post and a bunch of these things are issues in our elections. I agree with you that those should also be changed, but that still does not fix the core issue of term limits, of people sitting in positions, getting comfortable in positions, and then
Why
not
is
being
that a
accountable
problem?
to the people. This goes beyond elected officials, which we have not talked about yet, but somebody like a Fed chair. A Fed chair should not be able to sit there forever because a Fed chair, as of anybody else, is inevitably going to start thinking about their own interests when they are not in a position where they are new
If
there.
this debate was
They've had decades to establish relationships that are separate from the relationship with the public, right? That are
if
separate from
this
any
de-
of these things. They're going to have alternative interests, and that's why they need to go.
if
Same
this
goes for an
debate
FBI director. Same goes for And any of these agency directors and any of these things.
If this debate was, do you agree with term limits on some things? I would be in agreement with you, but that's not what the debate is. The debate is focused on should it be applied to across the board, and that is where I disagree with. That's where I disagree with
Right.
this
So why do
prompt.
you disagree with it on these appointed positions that I've just
I
mentioned?
didn't say that I disagree with it on appointed
Okay.
positions.
What do you disagree with term limits on
Congress
specifically?
elected positions, generally speaking, the president being an exception due to the immense amount of power that the presidency holds, which can be solved in other ways, which could then open that back up to pure or more liberal democratic principles.
Okay. So you don't think that every member of Congress has power. You've
Correct.
already said that. It doesn't make any sense when these votes are coming down to 1 to 5 votes that are deciding the complete funding of our government, the complete direction of our government. That would make me think that every single one of these votes matters quite a bit. Would you disagree that every vote matters when you have this tight of a margin?
This tight of a margin would be a good thing, and I don't mind the power being more vested in people that are elected representatives in those instances,
Right.
specifically because the majority of
So you
power is
agree that when it's
diffused.
close, they have a lot of power. Each member has a lot of power.
Sure, they have.
But your entire
They
reasoning earlier for not having term limits on them is that they don't have a lot of power.
no. My reasons were expertise, being able to follow democratic principles, and mitigating
There's no
power
reason that the
concentration and wealth.
expertise matters here. There's literally no reason that expertise means sitting in the same seat in the House for 20 years.
Do you disagree that the politics is a thing that people can become experts at?
I don't disagree with that. As I
Okay.
said
Do you
before,
believe
you
that's
can't hold the
important?
same position. You can be a state house representative. You can be a Senate member.
Do you
You
think that
can
the
then
House
go to the
is
House. You can make politics a career. You just can't sit in the same position for 20 years.
do you think that the expertise in a state legislature transfers to federal?
I think that it transfers well enough for people to be able to do the job well, considering first-time elected House members and first-time elected Senate members are able to do their job well from the get-go if they're
Okay.
decent people that are elected.
Would you say that there is expertise that does develop over time in specific elected positions? No, so you get different expertise for running state government than you do from running federal government positions.
It is different, but it's transferable. Is the thing.
Okay. So in your mind, it is not different enough to say that that's a thing that we should be.
Yeah,
concerned with.
it's not
Okay.
it's not different enough to create a problem for somebody to like not know what they're doing.
I mean, that's an impasse. So
Okay, so what your expertise point is bullshit. Your term limits leads to power being in the oligarchs. It's also bullshit because that's already the case without term limits, and makes no sense as to why that would become more of an issue, especially with how
it's
we've
more of
seen
an issue.
elections going for the last couple of years.
It's more of an issue because of the fact that when you have term limits, you do not have people that are able to build up their own independent power sources that then makes them be able to remove themselves from that. Bernie Sanders can only exist by him being in that position for as long as he's been in that position.
No. Bernie Sanders got elected. He could have stayed there for, I don't know, say 8-10 years.
No one would give a damn about Bernie Sanders
Senate
when he's not in Congress.
What?
No one would give a damn about Bernie Sanders.
He can still be in Congress. That's what you don't understand. He can't sit in his Senate seat. He can go to the House. That's also Congress.
So you can go back and forth, or are you saying that?
No, but if we have like a 10-year term limit, you can do that for 10 years, go to the other one for like 10, 12 years, something like that. That's 22 years of your life. Then you can move on.
Yeah, I just disagree.
In fact, then you can go back to your state and do some work back at home in the state Senate and the state House for another 20 years. That's 40 years of your life.
I fundamentally disagree with that, because the reason that Bernie Sanders has as much power as he has is because he's become a Senate institution in and of himself.
All right.
And could he not become a House institution with the other House fucking libtards? Sorry, that came out.
Do you believe that there is a benefit to having a congressperson who has an entire career to make the changes necessary?
In a singular position, no.
Okay. And you had said something about passing the torch. Do you believe that that is a reliable way to get a longer term goal accomplished?
Yeah, and I think it's smart for every politician to do. I think every politician should already be trying to do that, even if we don't have term limits.
How do you believe expertise matters in representation if representation is your stated goal?
One could argue that while being in the position, you learn more and more about your constituents' concerns while in that position, because you're going to have them come to you over different issues over time, and therefore you can become more of an expert of what your community or your whatever group you're representing. I would argue we need to have more Congress critters in office, but you could end up becoming more knowledgeable about what issues they are and do synthesis around those issues. So if somebody comes to you with one issue and another person comes with the other, then you can be like, wait, these are actually linked by this thing, and then you could maybe solve that thing to fix both issues.
Do you think it can take a long time to affect a change? Pretty straightforward question.
Just like generally, yes.
Like obviously
And I
governmentally,
think
like
I think it can take a long time, and it can take a lot of people.
what is your best reason that a person should have a lifetime appointment to a position?
I'm not sure if I would say that everybody should have a lifetime appointment to a position. I came into this with the understanding that this was an all or nothing kind of question. So when we have certain positions that are lifetimes, such as judges, that really slows down the change of progress that I think a lot of people would want or not want. But on the other side, conservatives actually like that. It is part of a function of our government and how it's designed. It's designed to be slow moving, and that is partly why judges are lifetime appointments. But I would not sit here and argue that every single position should be a lifetime appointment. I would even argue that many should be term limited. I'm specifically focused on the elected officials, which can be remedied through other means.
During the conversation, it seemed like you agreed someone like Bernie isn't bought off, but wouldn't someone like Bernie anointing someone under his wing that he likes be an unfair advantage if all candidates aren't starting on an equal playing field because whoever Bernie likes gets Bernie's voters?
I don't think the voters would entirely just blindly go to this person. I don't think it's really unfair for a candidate to say, "Hey, I'm leaving office. This is who I like." I think that is actually pretty transparent. And if voters want the same thing, the same sort of thing that Bernie has done, they can go and vote for that person. If they want a bit of a change, they can vote for somebody else. It's I think it's just transparency.
For an unelected position like Fed chair, isn't it important to keep someone in that seat during the set terms to avoid market turmoil or constantly changing monetary policy?
During the set terms, yes, but there's set terms. That's the thing. Is I don't think that we should have the same Fed chair for 40 years. But I think something like, as an example, like a 10-year Fed chair or a 5-year Fed chair, that is perfectly valid. But it's when they start going longer into like the decades that we run into problems. We run into ulterior motives. All right. So as I have said plenty of times at this point, I think that something very important about government is the government being accountable to the people and nothing else. The government should not be accountable to random corporations, foreign officers, or anybody else. And I think that having term limits allows for us to have a greater safety net in making sure that that is the case. Because when people are sitting here in our government in the same position for 40 years, talking to the same other people for 40 years, they're going to create ulterior motives, whether they want to or not. At a certain point, people get corrupted. Ultimate power ultimately corrupts. Um, and so having term limits allows us to try to avoid that a bit. It doesn't fix all the issues, but it avoids that a bit. It also, again, opens the door, new voices for possible third party candidates. When you have no incumbent, you have the option for something new. And that's not always going to be a Democrat or Republican. Some of you may like that, some of you may hate that, but it's facts. Um, at the end of the day, my opponent could not name something that he actually supported a lifetime appointment to, which seemingly would mean that some level of a limit here he would support. Now, he might not support it like written into law, like I'm saying. However, he supports some level here. He said he wouldn't like to see the judiciary in a lifetime appointment. That is, as far as I'm aware, the only true lifetime appointment we have. Everything else would need a limit, a term limit, somewhat some might call it. And again, just term limits protect our democracy from corruption. They protect our actual bureaucracy from stagnation, and it stops any individuals from gaining a super high level of entrenched power that they can then use for anything other than the will of the people. That's all I got.
So, as I argued, I believe that liberal democratic principles should be seen first and foremost in this. Term limits at their base for elected positions violate that, as it removes the people's choice to have their own representative. I would further argue that term limits does not actually help prevent oligarchy or foreign influence in our campaigns or in our parties. If anything, it actually helps that to happen because of the fact that a party needs to have continuity within generations. And in order to have that continuity without people serving long term within the elected positions, the party bosses have to be able to whip the parties into shape and get their things passed that way. And those are unelected, essentially unelected bureaucrats within the party structures themselves that are accountable to nobody except the people that fund them. So that is why I would say this. One thing that we didn't get into the debate is that I believe most of the issues that Gorps brought up is actually solved through other means that keep democratic principles, mainly getting rid of first past the post, winner take all voting systems, introducing some sort of ranked choice voting, or the like to make elections themselves more competitive. Once elections themselves are more competitive, should the populace decide that a person should no longer be there, it would be much easier for them to do so. However, if the populace decides they want that same person, a la Bernie Sanders or somebody else, maybe Nancy Pelosi, due to their effectiveness and their ability and their expertise that they have developed, the populace should be able to do that as well. That's really all I have for this. Thank you for the debate.